Okay, in this video I'm going to be going through the stages from actually setting up a job in the machine and cutting it. So you should have already watched the previous two videos that go through turning on the machine and setting up the software and selecting your tools and putting your cutters in to the machine, as well as setting the X, Y and Z origins of your tools. Okay, so in this one here I'm going to be making this lovely little cutout of a V-carving of a butterfly, okay, with nice vector lines. So I've already got this all set up and I've saved the toolpaths, but there's a few things in the Aspire software that I'm going to show you because they're important to know for understanding what your machine's going to do in your programming. So if I just go out of this for a sec, you can see your standard toolpath toolboard over here, and I'm just going to go into the material setup here. Now you don't normally need to go into this at all, but this is just so that you can see some of these decisions you would have made when you first set up your piece of material in this software to actually start putting your design together. So we have over here our XY date and position. That is where you're setting your XY point to, and we can see it's set to the bottom left. As I mentioned in the previous video, there's an opportunity for you to set it from the center of your piece if you're using a V-carving tool. In that case, you'd have to select it to be there. And you can see that's now moved things around on my board, and that's just because the toolpath has changed, not because my actual model has changed location. Okay, and that's just a case of recalculating your toolpath if you're going to set it to there. Okay, which is really important. You need to reset your toolpath, recalculate your toolpath, and then you need to resave your toolpath as well. Okay, but our standard one is to have it in the bottom left corner there, so that's what we're going to do. You can see that we're going to be setting our Z0 to the material surface. That's our standard as well. Okay, and that's why we set it to the top of the material, not to the machine bed. We don't need to change this at all. Okay, that's just talking about where my model actually is in relation to my material, in case my material surface is not the actual top surface that I want to be machining. So that's getting a little bit more advanced and we don't need to really go into that. Then down here we have our rapid Z gaps above material. Okay, so Z gaps means the height the cutter lifts up to when it is doing all the bits and pieces. So it might not need to be in the material the whole time, it might need to lift up and go across from another section to start another bit. Okay, and it's going to have a gap that it does that at, and it's telling me here that that gap is 5 millimeters. Now that's important because if you think, okay, well the clamps are not in the way of where I'm cutting, but it might be in the way of any of these red lines, which is the path the tool's going to take, then I need to know what that's going to be doing. Okay, and I need to then make sure I move my clamp or change my rapid. Okay, now if you change it, it will be changed for every other person who uses this after you. So just bear that in mind because you might need to tell somebody that you've changed it so it can go back to being 5 millimeters as our standard. We don't want that to be a huge height that we always have set well above where it needs to be, because that's going to make our cuts take a lot longer. So we want to make sure we have a nice clearance, but not an excessive clearance there. We have then here our home and start position is listed here, as you can see, as 0 and 0. Now I could change that, but again it would be changed for whoever comes after me. And I don't need it to be anything different. It should always be 0, 0. Now it says here another Z gap above material. So the difference between this Z gap above material here and the one above it is that this is the start and finish Z gap. So at the start of the program it will go to 0, 0, 20. Okay, so X0, Y0, Z is 20 millimeters above your actual piece of material. And that's important because often one of our clamps is actually sitting over where 0, 0 is for X and Y. So we definitely don't want that to be 5 millimeters above our material, otherwise it's going to run itself into one of our clamps. Similarly, at the end of the job, once it's finished its last cut, okay, it will lift itself all the way back up to 20 millimeters above the material and then go back to 0, 0. Okay, so the rapid one is just while it's moving in between your cuts. Start and finish, it always goes up to this value here, which is set at 20, okay, which is well clear of our clamps. Alrighty. So I've already saved it, but just in case you haven't gone through that yet, save toolpaths, and when we name our toolpaths, we always have in front of this V-carve one bit that will come up automatically, your name and what it is you are doing. Okay, so in this case, I've written sample and butterfly, okay, so that I know it's a sample one that I can use for testing in the future. After V-carve one, I always put in the cutter type and the size of the cutter. So V-bit, and this is a 12.5 60-degree cutter. Okay. So I'm in here. Now I need to have zeroed my tools. If I haven't done that, I can do that now. So I'm just going to, need to turn my number lock back on so I can get my other one down. I've done my X. So I just need to do my Y. And I'm lucky because I can just eyeball this one really. It doesn't need to be too perfect. Now if I don't need to type in a number, I can actually just click on that there to get that just to 0, 0. Okay, so I can always go back and check and make sure that my X1 is still good as well. And that should be at 0. Yeah, that's pretty close, that's good. Okay, and now I'm going to bring my cutter to the middle to just do my Z height one. So you should have already done this by the time that you get to this point, but if you haven't, this is a very good reminder to do this now. Okay, so changing my job mode to step, and then I'm just going to run that down until my bit of paper grips and tears. So that's it there now. Again, just click on that Z0 button there just to make it perfectly 0. Change my jog mode back to step, lift myself directly straight back up again, so I'm off the material, and then tab to get rid of that screen again. Okay, so now I have my X, Y and Z all set, ready to go. And I always like to do that before I put my program in, just in case something does go wrong. Okay, so I'm going to load my G code now, and I'm going to find my, not that one, libraries, documents, CNC Router, student work files, there it is there, in teacher, and it's decided to not turn up for some reason. Oh, that's a bit weird. Okay, so that should be reading them as text files, I believe, not as .taps. So that's all good. Okay, there's my sample one there. And I open that. And you always get a little bit concerned if something doesn't go as smoothly as you'd like it to. So I've got my program here and I can see, yes, that's okay. It's the right size that I've set it is for my material. And I can go down a little bit and I can just read it as well and check that, yeah, it's going to go to the right height. Okay, now if you can't read it, don't stress, you don't need to be able to. Oh, this one doesn't like to put that in there nice and easy to read. Okay, but I can also have a look over here and see that, yes, I've got my butterfly picture in there and that's all good. So I know it's read it, it hasn't corrupted or done something silly with it, and it's loaded and read the program properly. Okay, before I start my program, I'm again going to raise my Z height of my cutter to well above where I need it to be. This is just in case something does go wrong. I've got the ability to Oh, it's not jogging my thing around for some reason. I've got the ability to actually change that, to make sure that it's well out of the way in case it just decides to run across somewhere without actually going to my safe Z position. It's going to be there already. I'm just going to close the G-code for a second, see if that allows me to... There we go. That's a bit strange, but that's all right. So I'm just going to bring that tool well up, and then I'm going to load my G-code again. Your G-code shouldn't get in the way of you being able to jog your tool either. So we'll just check and make sure. Yep, I can still jog that now, so that's all good. Closing that down, opening it back up again has worked well. Geez, lots of problem solving you're seeing in this video. Isn't that wonderful? Alrighty. So well above the 20 millimeters above my work, and I can see that here because I can read that it is 44 millimeters above my work. Okay, so I'm going to turn this back around so you can see the tool actually cutting for this bit. But just important to note, in here it's still, even though you can only have one tool in there at a time, you can't do tool changes within the software. It will still get to a certain point where it wants to do a tool change. Okay, and we don't need to do a tool change, but it will stop at that point anyway. So you'll get all psyched up, press your cycle start, going, yeah, I hope it's okay, and it will do nothing, and then you have to click it again. Okay, so that's just a little bit of a word of warning there. I'm going to try and leave the extraction off for this one. It's only going to go for a minute and a half or so, this cut, so it shouldn't be too bad, just so that you can actually see and hear me talking when I'm doing bits and pieces. Okay. Bear with me while I move this camera around. All right. Nice and pretty there. Okay. The other thing I forgot to mention as well is that once I've clicked start, I do like to have my cursor just over the top of feed hold, where you press that in case I wanted to stop, or the space bar, which it says on the screen there, SPC means space bar. Okay, so when I click feed hold, all that it does is it stops the router from moving around, but the spindle is still spinning. But it's a good one if I just want to pause it. It's like the pause button, if you like. I can press that. It usually responds faster than just about any of the other commands. From that, I can then click the stop button if it's really going to go wrong. Or I can press the reset button. I have found that the reset takes longer to take effect than the other one. So if I just hover my finger over the space bar once I've got it started, then that's a bit of a safety measure for me. Okay. Alrighty, so I'm just going to click the start button now. That's run through the program. It's gotten to the tool, and in the tool information there's a yellow flashing light there saying tool change. Just ignore that, click the start again, and I'm now hovering my finger over the space bar. Okay, that's it going to 0, and then coming in now to do start is carving. Okay, sorry about the shaking of the camera, that's just the floor shaking around. So you can see there it going to its rapid height of 5 millimeters above the material as it's moving between cuts. and you saw at the end there again, it rose itself back up to 20 millimeters above the material before it went back over to the 0 point. Okay, so let's just jog that cut up out of the way so I can take this over and we can have a look at what's happened. Okay, so you can see our lovely pattern in the wood there. Okay, it's a bit messy at the moment because it's plywood. Plywood has a tendency to be a bit messy with its cutting. MDF and pine and jarrah and all the rest are a lot nicer. Now it does look like in some places it's a little shallow. That's most likely due to me being a little conservative with my Z height. Now if that's the case, I can always go and change the Z height by getting it back to 0, 0 and then taking it down another 0.1 or 0.2 of a millimetre, resetting it as 0 and then just allowing running the program back through again without moving anything. Okay, so that's a good problem solving tip if that goes wrong for you. It did get a little close to the clamp down this bottom right hand corner down here. If I'm paying attention and actually not trying to rush through something for a video, normally I'll go into the Aspire software and I will try and estimate how much space I have between the edge of my material and that point to make sure that my clamp is definitely going to be safe. And the other thing I have to think about here is with the cutter, because it has this kind of shape like this, even though that point there might be safe, is the side of that going to be safe when it's at the depth that I want it to be at when it's cutting that little bit down there. Okay, so normally I'll go in and do that and check that so that I don't have my heart in my mouth hoping I'm not going to ruin a clamp on a video. Okay, alrighty. So once you have your cut, assuming that you're all okay and happy with it, you can take it out of the clamps. Okay, and then you're going back to this software here. Before you close the program down, okay, always close your G code. Okay, it's not necessary, but it's a good practice to get into. Check and make sure that you have enough space at the back there to be able to reach in and get your on-off switch. Okay, and then you can go and close the program, and yes, you want to end your session, and no, you don't need to fix your save. Okay, so just going through with you what I was just talking about. If I go back to 2D view, I have a ruler up here, so I can actually use a guide without actually needing to put the guide in, just to kind of get an idea as to what distance it actually is that my piece is going to finish at, so I can set my clamp up accordingly. If I don't want the guide, I just drag it all the way back over there and it's gone. Okay, now this video hasn't covered, or these videos haven't really covered setting up your work on a sacrificial board. So none of these really kind of are suitable for if you're going to cut all the way through your material. This here was a mistake, not something that we should be doing on purpose. And we have a few sacrificial boards around for it. This video also hasn't covered using the 4th axis. Any of that stuff will be probably done in a video a little bit later on. So hopefully that's all the information that you need to know. If you're never sure, the x-axis and y-axis are actually written on the table, so you can't forget which one's which. And the Z is always the height. Okay, I hope that has helped you out